Robotech.
Robotech wasn't the show you thought it was. The version that aired on afternoon television in 1985, the one with the Voltron fighters, the love triangle, the alien armada bearing down on a wounded Earth, that version had been taken apart and rebuilt before it ever reached your screen. Not updated, not translated, rebuilt. Seams were cut. Character histories were erased. A woman's grief was removed so thoroughly that the person you watched for 36 episodes was essentially a portrait with the face painted over. The city inside the SDF-1 had an entire district American audiences were never allowed to see. And when the most beloved character in the series died, when Roy Fokker closed his eyes for the last time, the version of that death broadcast in the United States was a quiet, deliberate softening of what actually happened. This video is about what was taken out and why. By the end, you'll understand that the show you loved was a shadow of something darker, more human, and considerably more honest than what made it to your television set.
All right, we'll start the operation immediately. Lieutenant Hayes is on the base. Tell her to find the furnace controls and turn them on.
What you thought you knew. If you were watching television in 1985, Robotech felt unlike anything else on the dial. It had real continuity, the kind where characters died and stayed dead, and the story remembered what had happened to them. The romance felt genuinely uncertain. The war occasionally looked costly. For a generation raised on cartoons where the villains' robots exploded cleanly and the heroes always landed without a scratch, Robotech felt like it was telling you something true. And in many ways, it was. That instinct wasn't wrong, but there was a context most American audiences never had access to, and without it, you were watching an edited version of a story assembled from separate pieces. The show was built by Carl Masick and Harmony Gold from 3 unrelated Japanese anime series that had nothing to do with one another. The first, and the one that matters most here, was the Super Dimension Fortress Macross, which aired in Japan in 1982. It was a landmark work, sophisticated, emotionally complex, and deliberately adult in ways that its American adaptation would systematically dismantle. What American audiences believed they were watching was a single, original American series, a space opera with clear heroes and a linear mythology. The characters felt familiar in the way television characters are supposed to. Rick Hunter was the lovable, slightly reckless pilot. Lisa Hayes was the stern, dedicated officer whose coolness gradually thawed as her feelings for Rick deepened. Roy Fokker was the seasoned ace, the older brother figure, the man who made you feel like everything was survivable. Lin Minmay was the pop star whose voice somehow became a weapon against an alien civilization. These were the people you knew. What you didn't know was that Lisa Hayes had a dead fiancé, and his absence was the architecture of her entire personality. What you didn't know was that the SDF-1's civilian city, the one that looked like a wartime main street, full of shops and ordinary people making the best of an impossible situation, contained a red light district. That war, even aboard a spacecraft, generates the economy of desperation. That people under siege reach for comfort in ways that don't belong on afternoon television. What you didn't know was that Misa Hayase, Lisa's original Japanese counterpart, smoked cigarettes at her command station in the middle of a crisis. Because she was human and exhausted, and the weight of what she was carrying had a physical expression, and the American network decided that expression was unsuitable for broadcast. What you didn't know was that Roy Fokker bled. The show you watched was, in certain crucial ways, a more comfortable version of a story that wasn't designed to be comfortable. It was designed to be honest. And honesty, in 1985, had a specific set of network standards it was required to pass before it could reach you. It didn't pass all of them.
We beat them before and we'll beat them again.
I'm almost certain headquarters must be aware of what's going on.
Start with a single scene from the second episode. Rick Hunter wanders into a bathroom aboard the SDF-1 and discovers that Lin Minmay is already in the shower. In the American version, it's played as pure, innocent comedy. A startled scream, an embarrassed retreat, the kind of accidental encounter that resolves in seconds with no lingering awkwardness. Clean, safe, immediately forgotten. In the original Japanese version, Hikaru sees her silhouette through the shower curtain before she screams. The dialogue makes the situation more explicit. His reaction isn't just surprise, it's the particular, unmistakable embarrassment of a young man who has seen something he wasn't supposed to see, and knows it, and doesn't quite know where to put that knowledge. It's a small change, but small changes accumulate. And what they accumulate into tells you a great deal about the distance between what this series was and what America was permitted to receive. The original version.
Yes, we should be hearing from the cloning chamber.
Lord Retai, we have a transmission from Commander Ozonian.
The woman at the command station. In Macross, Misa Hayase smokes, not occasionally, consistently, throughout the series. During moments of high stress, during quiet contemplation between battles, during the particular stillness that settles over a command officer who has been awake too long and is running on discipline rather than rest. On the surface, it's a small character detail, but character details are not small. They are the difference between a person and a figure. A figure stands in frame and delivers exposition. A person has a habit that costs them something, that tells you who they are under the uniform, that roots them in a physical reality beyond the plot mechanics they exist to serve. Lisa Hayes, the American version, does not smoke. She is professional, composed, perpetually on mission. She's admirable in the way that cleaned-up authority figures tend to be. Competently, distantly, without the friction of a recognizable human flaw. The cigarette was removed because network standards in the mid-1980s didn't allow smoking in animated programming aimed at younger audiences. That's a documented, understandable institutional decision. But the cost of it was a layer of character that never made it through the edit.
Here you are, mister. One giant sirloin steak, medium rare.
Thanks a lot.
The city inside the ship. The civilian city inside the SDF-1 is one of the most remarkable world-building choices in either version of the story. The idea that a military warship, cut off from Earth and carrying a population of civilian survivors, would organically develop its own urban ecosystem, that's genuinely bold science fiction. It asks a real question. What does society look like when survival becomes the baseline and everyone has stopped expecting rescue? In the American version, the answer is wholesome. Shops, markets, families, people making do with remarkable cheerfulness for a civilian population trapped inside a battleship surrounded by an alien fleet. In Macross, the answer is more honest. The city has a red light district. It has the Pine Saloon and other adult establishments that characters, including Claudia Grant and Misa Hayase, are shown frequenting. The implication of prostitution is present. The moral ambiguity of what grows in the corners of a trapped and desperate population isn't sanitized away. It's depicted because that's what actually happens when people are afraid and far from home and running out of reasons to maintain the pretense of normalcy. This isn't gratuitous. It's environmental realism, the series saying, here is what war costs beyond the battlefield. Here is what it does to the social contract. Here is the economy that emerges when the ordinary economy stops making sense. None of that survived the translation to American television. The shower scene, in detail. Now here is what you heard. Here is what they actually said. In the American version of Episode 2, Rick Hunter's encounter with Minmay in the shower resolves quickly and cleanly. His reaction is surprise. The dialogue emphasizes that he wandered into the wrong place, rather than what he may or may not have seen. The subtext is, this is awkward, but nothing happened here. In the original Japanese version, as documented in fan translations of the episode, the dialogue is more explicit about the suggestive nature of the encounter. Hikaru's reaction expresses more direct acknowledgement of what he witnessed, the kind of response that makes clear he's not simply embarrassed about walking through the wrong door. The subtext in the original is different. Something did happen here, and they are both aware of it, and it will sit between them. One line of dialogue, one degree of explicitness in a moment of animated embarrassment. But the relational tone it sets is meaningfully different. It introduces a layer of adult awkwardness into their relationship from the very beginning, something the American version simply removed, because the American version needed these characters suitable for afternoon television. The difference between those two scenes is the difference between a story written for young adults and a story written for adults. One of those versions aired on American TV. The other one existed first. Why it was hidden. Harmony Gold acquired the licensing rights to the Super Dimension Fortress Macross, along with two other Japanese series, Super Dimension Cavalry Southern Cross and Genesis Climber Mospeada, in the early 1980s. The goal was to create an American animated series with enough episodes to qualify for syndication, which required a minimum of 65. No single series had enough on its own, so Carl Macek and his team did something genuinely audacious, and, depending on your perspective, either creatively resourceful or narratively catastrophic. They combined all three series into a single continuous narrative, rewrote the dialogue, restructured the storylines, and invented connective tissue that had never existed in the source material. This is the architectural reality of Robotech. It wasn't translated, it was assembled. And the editing choices that came out of that assembly weren't arbitrary. They operated within a very specific set of constraints. American broadcast standards in 1985, particularly FCC guidelines and network standards governing children's programming, prohibited explicit violence, including blood. They severely restricted or outright eliminated depictions of smoking, adult entertainment, and sexual content. The target demographic for afternoon syndicated animation skewed young. The toy market, which was the primary commercial engine driving animated programming in that era, required characters and settings marketable to children and their parents. Roy Fokker dying with blood at the corner of his mouth was not marketable. Lisa Hayes lighting a cigarette at her command station was not broadcast compliant. A red light district inside a spaceship was not suitable for children. These decisions were made by specific people in a specific institutional context with specific commercial pressures, and they weren't made out of malice. They were made because a Japanese anime series from 1982, produced for a Japanese adult audience, was being retrofitted for American afternoon television in 1985. The gap between those two contexts is enormous, and the editing reflects it. But here's what's worth sitting with. The people who made those decisions understood exactly what they were removing. They saw the original footage. They read the original scripts. They knew that Misa Hayase smoked, that the SDF-1 had a red light district, that Roy Fokker bled out rather than simply fading away. They made the calculation that American audiences, or more precisely, American networks and American advertisers, were not ready for those things. Roy Fokker's death in the original Japanese version is documented explicitly in the Macross fandom record. He coughs up blood before dying. In the American version, that detail was removed. The same death, the same character, the same moment of loss. But in one version, the cost of that loss is made visible in the most direct and unavoidable way. Blood on the mouth of a man who was supposed to be invincible. In the other, he simply stops. Both versions are sad, only one of them is honest.
Don't worry about a thing, I've got a very good place in mind. I'm for whatever it is.
The anchor revelation. But here is the thing that reframes everything else. Lisa Hayes had a dead fiancé. His name was Reber F.F. Ribbon. He was a military officer. He died in battle 5 years before the events of Macross begin. And Misa Hayase, the woman who became Lisa Hayes in the American version, had never recovered from it. His death is documented on the Macross fandom wiki as a defining element of her character, referenced throughout the series through internal monologues and flashbacks. In the original, it's the explanation for everything about her that seemed cold or remote or unnecessarily guarded. In the American version, that history simply doesn't exist. Every moment in Robotech where Lisa Hayes seems emotionally distant, every moment where her coolness feels like character rigidity rather than character depth, is a moment that, in the original, carries a specific and devastating explanation. She isn't cold because she's professionally reserved. She isn't remote because she's the straight-laced counterpoint to Min-May's warmth. She's the way she is because she loved someone, and that someone died in the same war she is still fighting. And she rebuilt herself around that absence so completely that the architecture of her grief became indistinguishable from her personality. Her journey toward Rick, toward allowing herself to feel something again, is, in the original, one of the most quietly extraordinary character arcs in the series. It's a woman dismantling a fortress she built with her own hands because the war that made her build it also sent her someone worth opening the door for. In the American version, she is a military officer who gradually develops feelings for the protagonist. Same woman. Same scenes, same words, more or less. But one version contains a wound that explains everything, and one version contains nothing at all. That was the edit. Not a scene, not a line of dialogue, not a detail of animation rendered slightly more explicit for a Japanese audience. A person was reduced. Her history was removed. Her grief was cut entirely. And what was lost wasn't just a scene. It was the emotional logic of the entire story. You watched 36 episodes of a woman whose most important truth was invisible. The version of her you knew was real. She was just always more than that. Here's the question worth sitting with. Every edit made to turn Macross into the Robotech you remember was made by someone who believed they were making the show more accessible, safer, more appropriate for the audience it was going to reach. And they weren't entirely wrong. The show that arrived on American television in 1985 was, by the standards of its time and context, remarkably mature. It had continuity and consequence and emotional weight that most American animation of that era couldn't match. Even the edited version was extraordinary for what it was. But it wasn't the whole story. A woman's grief was removed. A city's dark economics were painted over. A man's death was softened into something presentable. A shower scene lost its edge. A cigarette disappeared from a character's hand. They made a judgment call that the audience in 1985 needed a version of this story that was easier to receive. Whether something essential was quietly lost in that translation, or whether the show that came through was better for the adjustments, is genuinely worth arguing about. There's no clean answer. Both things feel true in different ways. Drop your take in the comments. There's a real conversation to be had here.